Apple TV's Severance, a mind-blurring mixture of workplace comedy, conspiracy thriller, sci-fi allegory, and weird fiction nightmare, will finally return for season 2 on January 17th. The first season aired in 2022. That is way too long to find out what happens next. That cliffhanger was ridiculous. 3 years is forever in television terms. You may have missed that the show even came out, never got around to watching it, or even forgot all or most of what happened in one of the strangest and most compelling TV shows I've ever seen.
You saw that painting? You want to get disemboweled today?
So we're gonna give everyone a refresher for season 1 of Severance. We're gonna remind you of all the main players, all the big concepts, all the absolutely head-scratching developments, and get you ready to watch the season 2 premiere. And hey, if you want to just go watch the show for yourself, it's only 9 episodes. It's really good. So we'll throw a spoiler warning on the screen because we're about to answer the question, what the f happened in Severance season 1?
Ow!
Are we back? Then friends, let's go to work. And if you're good, you'll get a waffle party.
I'm sorry, a waffle party?
Damn it, the waffle party. Like what the f? Okay, you know what, we'll get to it. Severance takes place in an exceptionally wintry part of the US, which is home to one of the facilities of Lumon Industries, a mega conglomerate biotechnology corporation. The company has come under scrutiny for its controversial new procedure. It's called Severance, like the name of that Apple TV Plus show. Effectively, employees/test subjects will have a chip implanted in their brains to permanently separate their work life from their home life. When they go to work, the chip is activated as they take the elevator down. They work their 8 to 12 hours or whatever, completely unaware of their lives outside of work. And when they go up the elevator, the real version of themselves wakes up, basically having blinked and missed an entire workday. Instantly, this brings up questions about autonomy and what constitutes a real person. The innie, which is the colloquial term for a severed person's at-work self, is a version of the person with no memory or concept of their life outside of work. They live entirely to wake up, work a full day, effectively blink, and go back to work the next day. That sucks. The Outie, meanwhile, gets to never work, but that doesn't mean their lives are all Mai Tais and hammocks. Some of their lives are pretty empty, especially in the case of Mark Scout, played by Adam Scott, our lead character. A former history professor, Mark Scout volunteered for the Lumon severing program because he's in immense grief after his wife Gemma has died. He just wants 8 hours when he's not sad, even if he doesn't actually remember it. That is grim. We see as the season goes along that Mark's Outie life is as depressing as it gets. His only connections are his pregnant sister Devon and her husband Rickon. Devon is incredibly dubious of Lumon, and Rickon wrote a self-help book, and that's kind of his only personality trait. However, it's a very important personality trait.
Duh.
Anyway, getting ahead of myself. So inside Lumon, Mark is called Mark S. Every employee is their first name and last initial. All the management calls people first name, last initial. I can confidently say that is the least weird thing about Lumon. Mark S. works in the Macrodata Refinement office and learns he's been made the department head following the sudden departure of Petey, Mark's best friend. The other members of Macrodata Refinement are Dylan G. and Irving B. Irv is a stickler for the rules. Lumon has this enormous book of rules employees have to follow, and Dylan is obsessed with hitting various performance goals and getting all the perks attached to them.
That gets you a caricature portrait. You'll note I've accrued an embarrassment of wealth in that regard.
On Mark's first day as head of department, he has to run orientation for new employee Helly R. Helly wakes up in a conference room where Mark, over an intercom, asks her various strange questions designed to prove that the severing process has worked.
Now, I know you're sleepy, but I just bet it'll make you feel right as rain.
Helly is absolutely not about this life. She thinks everyone is very weird and is pissed off that she'd have even agreed to this. She demands to leave, which she is allowed to do, but ends up instantly back inside. Her Outie, it seems, is not interested in whether or not the innie wants to work here. She's going to.
I have, of my own free accord, elected to undergo the procedure, colloquially known as severance.
The team of 4 work in an enormous empty office with white walls, green carpeting, and low ceilings. All 4 of their desks reside in the middle of the room, and there's a kitchenette off to the side, as well as a supply closet and a restroom. Why is the room so big? I think it's less about the room being big and more about making the employees feel small. And what exactly is Macrodata Refinement, or MDR? Their sole task is to identify groups of numbers on their computer terminal screen, fence those numbers off, and place the number groups in one of 5 buckets on their screens until all such number groups in a given file are identified. It is not known what the files are for, what the numbers mean, or what the goal of refinement is. The refiners only know that the work of Macrodata Refinement is, quote, mysterious and important.
Work is bullshit.
The work is mysterious and important.
When trying to learn how to actually do this very strange job, Helly learns the numbers give off a feeling of dread in the MDR employees. After a while, they can simply sense what numbers they need to fence off. That is so fucking weird. In fact, let's start a Severance's weird counter, okay? So far we have the procedure itself and Macrodata Refinement. Other just normal weird stuff we'll leave off for now. We have two more very important characters to introduce before we can get into the plot for the season. The first is Harmony Coble, played by Patricia Arquette, who is the manager of the severed floor at Lumon. She's nothing short of terrifying, and as we'll learn very quickly, while she lords over her staff with something close to an iron fist, she's also entirely beholden to the Board, a largely unseen group of higher-ups with whom Coble basically only interacts via speakerphone. Coble's second in command is Seth Milchick, a character who oozes sinister charm every moment he's on screen.
Good morning, Macrodata Refinement.
Milchick offers some of the most unnerving moments of the season. Not yet. So while Mark's Innie is dealing with Helly, his Outie, who lives in the Lumen-subsidized employee housing community of Kier, receives a strange visitor. Kier, by the way, is named after Lumen's founder, Kier Egan. We'll learn as the season goes on that inside Lumon, Kier Egan is a near-messianic figure, with a museum dedicated to him. Every CEO of Lumon has been an Egan descendant. Why? I mean, I guess we'll get into it. Anyway, God, so many tangents. Mark's visitor is a man claiming to be Petey, his now missing friend from inside, who gives Mark a mysterious envelope. The only thing is, Outie Mark has never met Petey. In fact, none of the severed employees, Outies, know anything about who they work with.
So I guess we're not friends.
Guess not.
This comes into sharp focus when we learn that Mark's neighbor, the friendly and nurturing Mrs. Selvig, is none other than his boss, Harmony Coble. To further illustrate how clamped down the severed employees are when working, Helly attempts to write a note to her Outie asking her to resign, but the elevator stops working. It turns out, attempting to contact or interact with your other self is strictly prohibited. Mark takes responsibility for this egregious action and as punishment goes to the break room. The break room is where you go when you're bad. Good employees don't have to go to the break room, they just work. Taking a break is bad. Do you get it, you fuck? In the break room, the offending employee is forced to read a prepared apology statement which amounts to a verbal self-flagellation, and they can only stop when Milchick feels that they really mean it. Elsewhere, Irving begins having hallucinations about a black liquid covering his desk, and he then goes for a wellness check. During wellness checks, employees go into a room with the counselor, Ms. Casey, where she reads a list of facts about the person's Outie. The Innie is supposed to react neutrally to this information. While at the wellness center, Irving meets Bert, the head of the two-person optics and design department.
It's rare to meet a sophisticate.
Their job is to create and hang up all the various paintings that hang throughout the otherwise barren hallways of Lumon. As the season goes on, the incredibly sweet infatuation between Irving and Bert begins and grows. John Turturro and Christopher Walken are truly wonderful together. It's honestly the only OTP I've ever shipped. Is that even how you say that? I'm 40. Outside, Mark meets up with Petey again, who explains that he's been unsevered and has reintegration sickness, which results in hallucinations of lapsed memories. And you wonder why the press think the Severance program is a bad idea. Petey tells Mark about the break room and plays a recording of himself reciting the apology with Milchick standing over him. Mark lets Petey stay in his house in secret. Nobody is supposed to know he's there. Petey tells Mark that mysterious benefactors helped him undergo the reintegration process.
Who's they?
They is a group of people that know Severance is a blight on mankind.
Which, given the issues he's suffering, leads us to believe Lumon never really intended anyone to unsever themselves. While Mark is at work, Devin and Rickon drop off the self-help book that Rickon has written, entitled The You Are. Almost immediately, Mrs. Selvig breaks in to steal the book to check for hidden messages. Petey sees her rummaging around, recognizes her as Coble, and runs away. Coble then takes the book back to Lumon for Milchick to look at. At the office, Helly is having a hard time dealing with her Outie's constant rejection of her pleas to leave. Irving helpfully offers to show her the Perpetuity Wing to hopefully show her why she would have wanted to work there. The Perpetuity Wing is entirely devoted to the worship of Kier Egan and his dynasty. We're talking like the Smithsonian, the Louvre, and Disneyland's Hall of Presidents all rolled into one. The Perpetuity Wing houses a room of mannequins, all depicting Kier and the succession of Lumen CEOs. The Lumen Legacy of Joy, which is just a room full of screens cycling through smiles of people on the outside whom Lumen has helped. And the Piece of Resistance, a full-size replica of Kier Egan's childhood home, which looks not entirely unlike the Bates house from Psycho.
We all go a little mad sometimes.
The Perpetuity Wing is one of the few places the severed floor can reach without explicit authorization, and despite it being down an elevator and then further down some stairs, it appears to be lit via a skylight. How big is this f***ing place? There's way more weird stuff specifically about Kier that we learn in this section, but for now, we're just gonna add 5 to the weird counter and move on. Despite this riveting and calming trip to the Perpetuity Wing, Helly tries to escape again, and Milchick sends her to the break room to recite apologies on repeat until she breaks down.
Sit, please.
On his way home, Mark follows an ambulance to a convenience store where he sees Petey has collapsed and died after fleeing Mark's house. Mark quickly heads home to clean up evidence of the house guest, only for Petey's cell phone to ring. Mark doesn't pick up and notices several missed calls from the same number. Irving discovers Rickon's book, which Milchick abandoned during Helly's escape attempt, and gives it to Mark to give to management. Mark says he will, but instead decides to keep the book and begins to read it in secret. While to us sounding like it was written by a pretentious idiot, Mark finds Rickon's words both reassuring and self-actualizing, complete with its thinly veiled anti-establishment language. Coble attends Petey's funeral as Mrs. Selvig and secretly removes his severance chip prior to his cremation. She then has Miss Casey give Mark a special wellness check, which she watches remotely. Miss Casey has Mark sculpt his emotional state out of clay. He sculpts a tree, which is the same tree his Outie visited in remembrance of his late wife Gemma after her funeral. Okay folks, the next bit of the story deals with some very heavy and troubling topics, so we're gonna throw up a warning as well as a time code should you choose to skip any of this. Please take care of yourselves. Helly ended up having to recite the apology over 1,000 times, but she isn't deterred. She threatens to mutilate herself with a paper cutter unless she is allowed a video resignation request. Coble allows this, and Helly hopes her Outie will finally understand the gravity of the situation. This proves not to be the case, however. Helly's Outie sends a video response back which effectively says it doesn't matter what any Helly wants, she's not a real person.
I am a person. You are not. I make the decisions.
She does what she's told. She has no rights nor autonomy. She exists only to work. This is naturally a devastating thing to hear yourself say, and Helly becomes both despondent for her own lot in life and filled with hatred for her Outie. She smuggles an electrical cord into an elevator shaft and attempts to hang herself. She suffers injuries but ultimately survives. Helly is then absent for work for 3 days. When Helly returns to work, Coble tells Miss Casey to keep a close eye on her, but Mark sneaks Helly out of MDR and shows her something he's found. You see, the MDR team has a picture of themselves in the office. Why would you want to look at that? When Petey left and Helly came in, Milchick took a new photo. When Mark took the old photo out of the frame, he discovered Petey had been attempting to make a map of the severed floor on the back of that photo. Mapping of any kind is forbidden on the severed floor because Kier Egan has decreed, quote,
"It's an Egan rule, render not my creation in miniature."
Let's just ding another weird thing here, okay? Jesus. Mark has been attempting to copy and finish Petey's map and tells Helly about this in the hope of teaming up. She's hesitant at first. However, she agrees when they start to hear, down an unlit hallway, hoo boy. Okay, so they start to hear what at first sounds like a baby crying, but turns out to be the bleating of baby goats. They walk into a small lit room with a bunch of baby goats and haystacks. In the middle of the room is a single employee feeding one with a bottle. He says,
"They're not ready. You can't take them yet, they're not ready."
What in the entire ready for what? What do goats have to do with numbers that make you scared or paintings of clouds? 19 weirdness points right now. Irving and Dylan, meanwhile, realize that Lumen has been pitting the departments against each other. No department is ever supposed to interact, despite Irving and Bert doing so pretty regularly. They also have no idea how many departments Lumen has, let alone just on the severed floor. So to sow distrust between departments, Lumen has been spreading rumors which become baked-in prejudices.
According to some, you each have a larval offspring that will jump out and attack if we get too close.
That's fucking psycho.
For example, Optics and Design all think MDR are barbaric and attacked O&D, depicted in a painting called The Macrodata Refinement Calamity. while MDR thinks O&D once invaded and massacred MDR due to a painting called The Grim Barbarity of Optics and Design. Those are the same painting. But Bert, in order to continue getting close with Irving, invites Irv and Dylan to O&D to meet the whole team. It's not just two people, it's like a whole team of people. Ms. Casey is put into the break room for failing to keep Helly under wraps, while Mark has Irving introduce all of MDR to O&D, where he suggests the groups work together to uncover Lumon's secrets. Milchick finds this and sends Mark to the break room, not realizing at first that Dylan has placed a card from O&D in his pocket. That night, Milchick goes to Dylan's Outie's house and convinces him to sit in a coat closet, where Milchick then wakes up Dylan's innie to ask for the card back. Dylan is confused and then terrified when a child comes into the closet, throws his arms around Dylan and calls him daddy. Dylan's Outie has a son he didn't know about. In order to more closely monitor Mark, Coble as Mrs. Selvig insinuates herself into Devin and Rickon's life as their lactation consultant after Devin has the baby. Devin tells Coble a weird interaction she had with a woman she met at her birthing lodge. The woman doesn't recognize her, despite them having talked at length. It turns out that the woman, Gabby, is the wife of Angelo Arteta, a Lumen-backed state senator who supports legalizing severance for all workplaces. Devin believes, rightly, that Gabby had herself severed so as not to remember the pain of childbirth. Outie Mark, after a disastrous date with Devin's midwife Alexa, finally answers Petey's phone and speaks to Dr. Reghabi, a former Lumen employee who got out and had been the one to tip Petey off to Lumen's shady activity, as well as give him the reintroduction surgery. Unfortunately, Lumen's chief of security Doug Grainer has been on to Reghabi for some time, and when Mark goes to meet with her, Grainer shows up.
It's okay. I'm a friend.
Dr. Reghabi kills Grainer and quickly gives Mark his key card, asking him to give it to his innie so they can have access to the whole facility. Coble then has a lock installed on MDR's door so they can't leave, but Milchick gives MDR a treat for Helly not trying to escape for a week or whatever.
Helly R, please step forward.
A 5-minute music dance experience. Strobe lights begin, Helly picks a maraca to shake, and the team begins to dance along with Milchick. This scene of Milchick dancing is hands down the most disturbing thing Milchick does in a stream of weird and disturbing things. 5 weirdness points, plus a round of applause for Tremel Tillman, who absolutely nails the performance as Milchick.
Excellent choice.
All of MDR has fun during the music dance experience, except Dylan, who has not gotten over the fleeting glimpse at the son he never knew about. He then attacks Milchick, and when Milchick goes to report it to Coble, Dylan tells the others about Lumen waking him up outside.
They can wake us up.
What?
On the outside, it's called the overtime contingency.
Helly and Mark use the key card to go to security, where they learn that every employee is strictly and constantly monitored. They also learn that the overtime contingency can be triggered from that office, but it requires simultaneous pulling of 2 levers across from each other. Very important for later. Irving is worried about Bert and goes to see how he is, learning only then that Bert is retiring. He then openly berates Milchick, who is not severed, for exploiting severed employees.
You smug motherfucker. You're not severed.
To really drive that point home, that night Alexa visits a drunk Mark who tears up a picture of he and Gemma in a rage. When she leaves, he begins to put it back together, and only then do we learn that Gemma is Ms. Casey. We're in the home stretch now, folks. We see Irving's Outie's apartment. He lives alone and paints portraits of a long, inky black corridor, the same as he'd seen in his hallucinations earlier in the season. Coble schedules Mark a final wellness session with Ms. Casey. Coble is visibly disappointed that Mark and Casey seemingly don't recognize each other. She then orders Ms. Casey sent down to the testing floor, the entrance to which is the same dark corridor from Irving's paintings. 2 more weirdness points, please. Coble is suspended by the board for not disclosing the severity of Helly's escape attempts, as well as for her activities as Mrs. Selvig. So she has apparently been doing all of this of her own accord, not under Lumen's guidance. MDR has met their refinement quota for the quarter, which gives them an egg social as a perk. Dylan, as the one who refined the most macrodata, what the f***, man, is the winner of the Waffle Party, the greatest perk available to the Lumen employees.
I've ordered the pre-Waffle Party Egg Bar Social for everyone.
Waffle parties take place after work hours. Dylan says he will stay behind after in order to man the levers to wake Helly and Mark up on the outside. Before leaving for the night, Helly kisses Mark for luck and also for more than luck. Outside, Mark goes to a reading of Rickon's book, where he tells Mrs. Selvig he plans to leave Lumon. She encourages him to do so.
Get away from them, Mark.
Now, what is a waffle party? Okay. A waffle party takes place in the Perpetuity Wing within the replica house of Keir Egan. Dylan arrives to find a table setting with a plate of 3 Belgian waffles, a flawless pat of butter, a carafe of syrup, and a goblet of milk. After finishing the waffles, Dylan sees that on the plate are printed the words, "Go now to the founder's bed." He heads upstairs to Keir's usually off-limits bedroom, and on the bed is a giant Keir Egan mask and a cat o' nine tails. After sitting on the bed and donning the mask, Dylan is treated to a highly sexualized dance from 4 masked people, 3 women and a man, each representing one of the 4 tempers, which is a whole f***ing thing, but their masks are a bride, a fool, a crone, and a ram. After the dance, we can assume this usually leads to a masked orgy where the winner gets to live out their greatest Keir Egan fantasy, but on this occasion, Dylan sneaks out and heads to the security wing where he wakes up Mark, Helly, and Irving outside. You're gonna have dreams about waffle parties now. I do. Innie Mark wakes up in Devon's home mid-hug of Mrs. Selvig, whom he knows as Koble. He tries not to give the game away, but accidentally calls her by the wrong name.
Okay, thanks, Ms. Cobell.
She leaves and calls Milchick, telling him that the overtime contingency has been activated. Mark privately finds Devon and tells her he's in his Innie form. She tells him of Gemma's death, and he tells her that Mrs. Selvig is actually his boss. Devon is understandably very upset and urges Mark to go to the press, not the police, since Lumon owns the police. Elsewhere, Irving wakes up in his apartment, sees all the testing floor corridor paintings, and learns that his Outie was in the US Navy. Inside his closet, he finds a map and an employee directory his Outie had made, which he decides to use to find Bert on the outside. Helly, f***ing hell you guys. Helly wakes up fully rizzed up, again, I'm 40, at a lavish Lumon gala event. She learns that her Outie's name is Helena Egan, daughter of the current Lumon CEO James Egan, who mentions a revolving ceremony wherein the CEO will step down and a new one will succeed. The new one is Helena, who underwent the severance procedure as a way to sway public support for legalization. 30 f***ing weirdness points. The season ends with an intense sequence of the Innies unaware that Milchick and Koble know of their actions. While Milchick tries to get into the security office as Dylan desperately tries to hold the levers and the door shut, Irving finds Bert's house only to learn that Bert's already in a relationship. Helly is due to give a speech at the gala where she begins shouting that she is the Innie, the procedure is torture, and Lumon is subjugating and tormenting its employees.
I'm an Innie. And everything they've told you about Severance is a lie.
The episode ends with Mark finding the picture of himself and Gemma and recognizes her to be Ms. Casey and desperately shouts, "She's alive!" just as Milchick manages to break in and cease the overtime contingency. Fuck! We've had to wait 3 years with She's Alive ringing in our damn heads! So as you can see, Severance is a super chill show you can easily watch while playing Candy Crush or doing dishes. Ahead of season 2, we have so many questions. Questions like, what was Koble doing and why? How does Irving's Outie know about the testing floor, and why was he keeping a list of employees and a map? What is up with Irving? Did Lumon, or Koble for that matter, fake Gemma's death, or are they merely taking advantage of an accident? Is she like a zombie person or a clone, or was she just straight up kidnapped? Who are the board, and what exactly is the revolving ceremony? What is the goddamn purpose of Macrodata Refinement, and why do numbers on a screen elicit an emotion? Is any of the stuff about Keir or the history of Lumon real, or was it simply made up as another means of controlling the severed employees? And what, for the love of former Yankees relief pitcher Brian Bohannon, is the deal with the goddamn goats? I'm serious, I need to know about the goats.
It isn't time.
If you'd like deeper discussions and theories about these questions, go check out Mikey Walsh's piece on Nerdist.com. Severance is such a complex and rewardingly strange piece of television, and we are so excited it's finally back. Would you like us to dig deeper into Severance? Do you have theories about the goats? I would love to hear the goat theories. Let us know in the comments below. Thank you very much for watching. Remember, work shouldn't be your whole life. Some of it should be watching videos on Nerdist.com. Enjoy your waffle party.